Hello there, John Coturillo here, the counsellor of your listener. Thank you for joining me for this episode. Today I am, as you most likely read in the title, going to be discussing politics, but not in the way that you're most likely expecting most people to discuss politics. As per usual, before I begin, what you see on the internet or hear on the internet is not advice. Please do not take anything that we discuss today to be a suggestion of what you should or shouldn't believe. I'm not trying to tell you what to believe or what to do. I'm not trying to suggest that people of one perspective are inherently better or worse than another. I'm going to be discussing perspectives and social psychology so as to help you be a more informed consumer of the information that you most likely receive on a day-to-day basis. Most of you will know me as an apolitical figure in the sense that my discussions and my educative approach are all designed to be informative. They're not designed to be persuasive in the sense of attempting to get you to believe what I want you to believe for my benefit. I'm trying to educate you on how complex the mind is so that you can account for those complexities when you're analysing and consuming information in the world, and so that you can ultimately be a more critical thinker. Largely I have avoided political topics, mainly because I'm not an expert on every phenomenon in the world. I'm certainly not one to discuss finance or economics or trade or foreign affairs. Those are not my areas of expertise. But also, I don't want anyone to get the impression that I'm a pundit selling a particular set of beliefs, because that's not what I am at all. I am a counsellor, I'm an educator, and essentially I'm not leading so much a journey as I am guiding people through a journey of the search for objective truth. I'm not barracking for a particular cause, but any matter that is related to politics or that is labelled political in any way, by nature does affect us all, because the way that our societies are governed all involves politics. That said, the fact that we're discussing these important issues that are associated with politics in some way does not mean that I'm becoming politically biased. I'm not suggesting that there is an absolutely definite answer, that one political viewpoint is necessarily correct and that all others are incorrect. And at the same time, even if I do believe that one particular viewpoint is more valid than others, the fact that a particular political group holds that belief is not to say that I support that political group or that I support their particular set of ideologies. It's just that that particular viewpoint on one particular matter may have, as far as I can analyse, a stronger set of evidence to support it than other viewpoints. But I'm not going to claim that I absolutely know that for certain. The fact about politics is that in and of itself it's a lie, and it's an incredibly evil game. And the fact is that approaching and discussing and addressing a political issue or an issue of political importance isn't inherently bad until you approach it from a political standpoint. And I'm going to discuss what that means throughout the episode. But discussing something from a perspective of facts and logic rather than rhetoric, the desire to persuade people for one's own benefit, even if the issue is politically related, is in of itself not political. It becomes political when it has a specific intention behind it. And that's when it starts to become an evil game. People do need to be informed about this. People need to be informed about why politics exists and how it affects us, but people vastly aren't informed about this. So today we're going to be discussing why politics is in of itself an evil game, and why approaching issues should be done in a non-political fashion if it is to be done from a place of logic, truth, and truth-seeking, and not simply for persuasive purposes. So to begin, politics is socially constructed, that is to say, it's invented. Nature didn't invent politics. When humans came into existence, nature did not assign us a particular set of political beliefs or a set of religious beliefs and a given set of people who held those beliefs and said, this is the group of people and the set of beliefs that this group will follow, that is the set of people and the set of beliefs that that group will follow. That's not what happened. Nature created us and gave us a basic set of needs, and we had some innate knowledge and we had to learn some other knowledge about how to fulfill those needs. And some beliefs may even reflect those basic needs, but largely beliefs are invented. We invented beliefs for a number of different purposes. And throughout my program, I've been discussing the different reasons why people hold different beliefs. To recapitulate briefly, people hold beliefs because we have an innate psychological tendency to attempt to make sense of a complex world in simple ways. And so we try to fill in the gaps, so to speak, of our knowledge by inventing explanations for what we don't know. And often what happens is these explanations become rather exaggerated. We adopt them in ways which the inventors of those explanations didn't necessarily intend, or possibly did, depending on what their intentions were. As time passes, people start to hold them with stronger convictions, and they actually end up forming groups that hold those beliefs, and then we become more and more polarized. The groups start to become adversarial with each other as they strengthen their respective beliefs and start to believe that people who don't believe as they believe are inherently wrong or potentially dangerous. Our minds need to make sense of the world in some way, otherwise we could never take action on a daily basis. Whether you know it or not, all of the decisions you make on a daily basis, no matter how insignificant they may seem, are based on a set of assumptions which we implicitly hold, and those types of assumptions are what constitute many beliefs and the reason for their existence. But you don't need to observe for particularly long in the world to notice that there are major groups with common sets of beliefs. For example, people voting for the same politicians, they vote for the same policies, and they do so for the same reasons. When you ask them why they believe what they believe, they will largely quote the same reasons for doing so. And often these groups are in polar opposites to each other, and they are polarized. They oppose each other, not just in terms of their belief, but on a moral basis. They believe that people who don't believe as we believe must be not just wrong, but also have some evil or bad quality to them, inherently bad for not agreeing with us. And even if multiple people who hold very similar beliefs do so, when there are some difference in specific parts of their beliefs, they will often argue that only their particular interpretation is correct and that other people, even on the same side of the argument as them, who hold similar beliefs otherwise, must be inherently wrong. But let's face the truth, something that's very seldom said out loud. Truth is not subjective, and when you dissect any set of beliefs, there are always going to be core ideas that cannot be pluralistic. In other words, in those domains, there can only be one core idea that is true, or a definite number of core ideas that are true. Yet people hold completely opposite convictions. These opposite convictions cannot be absolutely both true. What that means is, at least in any given domain where there are strong opposing core beliefs, at least one group must be living a lie. Because it's simply impossible for a number of different beliefs on the same issue to be absolutely true in the way that people claim it is. Now, I've been analysing various different types of rhetoric, that is to say, communication that's made and ideas that are spread for the purpose of persuading people so that they benefit whoever's spreading them. I've been analysing rhetoric for a long time, and what has become apparent, and yet frighteningly enough, very few, if any, people recognise this, is that all rhetoric has some common flaws in it. And regardless of what type of belief it is, or what specific belief it is, or what group it might be from, the nature of the cognitive flaws, the nature of the errors in thinking, are almost identical in each of these different types of beliefs. Let us describe first what some of these flaws are, some of the main ones. The first type of flaw is that people who try to spread these ideas tend to use intellectually dishonest tactics, whether they intend to or not. And in my collaboration with Evan Shapiro some time ago, we discussed what some of these intellectually dishonest tactics are. To recapitulate in brief, let's list some of them. One is logical inconsistency, which means applying the reason that you believe in something in one situation, but not to another, even though the reasoning is actually equally applicable to all of those situations. Another is straw manning, which means attempting to persuade someone to agree with you by using an argument that's not actually related to the topic that's the subject of the argument, but people assume it is because it seems on face value to be so similar to the topic that people have an emotional reaction to it, and they assume that your argument is valid, even though if they analyse it very carefully, they'd realise that the argument you're making has nothing to do with the topic at hand. The next is double subjective standards, which means arguing that a particular set of values should apply in one scenario but not another, even though it actually applies equally in both. Another is appealing to authority and consensus, that is to say, arguing that a particular idea is true simply because a person of a particular standing says it's true, or a certain number of people says it's true. Next is mischaracterizing and assuming, which means making a claim that just because somebody believes in a particular idea that you know all the other ideas in which they believe. Again, this is not always the case. A major one is mistaking an assigned or related quality for an inherent quality, that is to say, claiming that just because two events tend to occur alongside each other, that one actually causes the other, or that just because something happens in a specific way on a large number of instances, that it must always happen that way. Basically what it means is just because an idea has flaws, that it can't be valid in any way. Another is seeking evidence that confirms what we believe, but ignoring all the evidence that potentially disconfirms what we believe. Another is choosing something to believe just for the sake of it. And this occurs in instances when we don't actually know the objective truth about something. So rather than admitting that we're ignorant and being comfortable just seeking information as much as possible and analysing information, we want to give ourselves reassurance that we're intelligent. So we simply assume that we know something and then we use other dishonest tactics to try and support it as the truth, even though in reality we don't know the truth. Another is feigning societal vision, which means trying to persuade people to believe that your ideas are good by saying, I'm only believing this because it's in other people's best interests. Often when people say this, they don't really have other people's best interests in mind, they just benefit from other people agreeing with them. Another is the us and them mentality, which means assuming or arguing that just because somebody agrees with you that they must be inherently good, and anyone who doesn't agree with you is inherently bad. Another is making inflammatory statements or controversial statements, and then after people become inflamed by it, trying to retract it by saying, no, that's not what I meant, if you misinterpreted it, that's your fault. This is something we often see in the media, and in reality, people whose job it is to persuade you of something know how people communicate and they know how people receive information. If they didn't mean for the comment to be inflammatory, they wouldn't have made it. They did it on purpose to get people inflamed. In addition to intellectually dishonest tactics, there are a number of other features that rhetoric tends to have in common. One feature is fear-mongering, which means claiming to care about other people or society at large, and then arguing that anyone who doesn't agree with you is inherently bad or must not care about other people or society at large. And often this is how authoritarians are able to operate their regimes and fulfill their desires for power. It's by playing on people's emotions and convincing gullible people that if you don't agree with them, then you will be missing some idea of objective logic that will place you in danger. They'll claim that I believe what is in other people's best interest. Here are a set of rhetorical arguments that prove, so to speak, that I care about other people's best interests. And if you don't agree with me, then you're ignoring what's in other people's best interests and you're ignoring what's in yours. And something bad will happen to you if you don't follow what I say you should. Another particularly common feature is that a person of a particular ideology will claim to care about society and claim that all the arguments they make in favour of their ideas are in society's best interest, but they will always attribute the problems that they perceive in society to the other side of the argument. And they rarely, if ever, discuss issues that have nothing to do with that rivalry. So when a particular journalist, for example, has a particular program and they discuss issues that are of concern to them, they claim that these concerns are what is damaging society, but there are a number of issues in which their ideas clearly are wrong, and yet they never discuss those issues because it would mean having to admit that the other side actually has more valid ideas than they do. Another feature is how they justify the use of authority, and often this comes in the form of taking everything that they believe is wrong or that they hate, they have an emotional attachment to hating it, and try to make justifications about why the government should step in and ban that which they hate, but then claim that everything else which they like should be encouraged. Again, every side of politics tends to make this argument, and so basically, according to these different sides, what should be banned is different and what should be encouraged is different. Again, the problem is we can only have one set of laws. So, and in many of these areas, what is objectively bad for society and what is objectively good can only be quite limited in each case. So at least one of these groups, or potentially all of them, may actually be living a lie. Another feature is how they respond to humour. People of a particular viewpoint tend to become rather offended by jokes that are made on the subject of their own beliefs, but they insist that jokes about other people's beliefs should be protected by free speech and tell people who might be offended by them to get over it. Another feature is that when a person is from a particular side of an argument, they will minimise when someone from their side of the argument does something questionable or wrong, but they'll be outraged if somebody from the other side does the same thing in their particular domain. So if someone from a particular political ideology, for example, does something that is very clearly controversial or wrong, the people who support that particular ideology will most likely argue, well, yes, technically they did something wrong, but they had all these excuses. And let's not forget that people on the other side do it as well. But when somebody from the other side of the argument does something very similar, it will offend their sensibilities and they'll make a complete noise about it. Another key feature is the distinctions between the different groups and the different people who support particular beliefs. So when you take politics or ideologies of belief as a whole, the people who seem to be the most polarized tend to be the ones who are most vocal and most public. So if you analyze the difference between different journalists who have particular political biases or different politicians, what you'll find is that the way that they present themselves in comparison to each other is the most opposing, is the most polarized. If you speak to most citizens and most people who are not public figures, most people who do not have a particular political agenda, most of the time their beliefs are a lot more moderate, which means that they're not as bothered by people whose beliefs are slightly different, and they don't tend to take absolutist approaches by believing one particular idea to be true in one particular domain and discounting that every other idea can be true. What this demonstrates is that this polarization does not actually reflect truth, and when people say this idea is right and every other idea is wrong, it doesn't actually mean they're telling the truth. What's actually happening is when the elites separate themselves by presenting themselves as very polar opposite to each other, it's actually a tool for selling benefits, because when people's emotions are appealed to and they start to follow a particular belief leader because they believe that person has their best interests in mind, they also internalize the belief that they should stigmatize and oppose people who have different beliefs. In reality, the elites aren't actually that opposed to each other. They don't actually benefit from being opposed to each other. They benefit from their followers being opposed to each other. The more strongly people feel like others are opposing them and others are therefore their enemies and a danger to them, the more those people will then pay the people they follow, the elites, to protect them by buying their journalistic content, for example, or voting for them. So, in reality, politics does not reflect truth. All politics is based on people's emotions. Okay? Everyone has a need to feel like they know truths about life. Everyone has a need to feel like they're included and that they're not alone in the world and have no protection from anyone else if danger were to come their way. Everyone has those needs. And if we don't feel included, protected, and in knowledge, we're likely to have a significant amount of existential anxiety, whether we know it or not. Politics appeals to people's emotions. It essentially sells them an idea that says, if you just believe this, you will know the truth about all the issues that are important in the world, and it will protect you, because you will be fighting against falsities. Again, in reality, every person who has this strong set of beliefs has these cognitive flaws present. All their sets of arguments, all their ideologies, every one of which you can think has these same flaws. They can't all be right, which means that at least some of them were invented for the wrong reasons and are lies. The likelihood is all of them are lies. Life did not invent politics, therefore you cannot take one political standpoint and say, this explains all the truths about the world, because the fact is that it doesn't. You cannot explain things by ideology. If these are all lies, then why did they develop? Why does politics even exist? As I said previously, from an evolutionary standpoint, the human mind tries to seek simple answers to complex questions in life, because again, if we didn't make a set of assumptions about how the world works, there would be so much information that we didn't have when making daily decisions that we could never survive because we could never take action. And one of the needs we have is also for social inclusion. And when we see other people validating what we believe, especially if it's someone who seems to have a particular set of credentials or particular authority, that validation provides us with a pleasurable emotional sensation that then reinforces that we should keep believing what we're believing because it gives us that sense of safety. What doesn't make this any easier is that the human mind tends to retrieve from memory and use in quick decision making information that is most attached to emotions because it's the easiest to remember. Emotions are essentially internal signals on how we should direct our focus to something. If an emotion is attached to something, the mind is going to find it easiest to recall, and it's most likely to use that information in decision making without conducting any further thought. Rhetoricians, or people whose job it is to persuade you for their benefits, know this, and they play on people's emotions for that reason. Think about all these logical flaws. Think about how people abuse power, kill each other over differences. World wars have happened over it. In each of these cases, there would be flaws in all the opposing arguments of the opposing sides who war. If both of them were wrong, why did they kill each other? Why would they attack each other? The fact is that the people who hold the power and who start these conflicts seldom suffer from their wielding of it anywhere near, if at all, as much as the people who actually undertake the conflict. In reality, they're possibly all in cahoots with each other. The people at the top of the societal chain hold quite a lot more similarity to each other while pretending to be enemies, and yet the people at the bottom are the ones who get harmed, and people continue to let it happen. You cannot be stupid enough to enter politics seeing all this and thinking, I'll do it differently. No, I'll do what's in society's best interest. I won't let it corrupt me. In reality, people enter politics because they desire control. It's an unnatural desire. People don't become popular or voted in because they're correct. They become voted in because the human mind is flawed and tends to act only on emotions rather than logic. Now, you may be asking, well, if you don't take sides, what do you do? I'm going to reference something that often happens here. People from a particularly strong viewpoint, political viewpoint, often make the argument that anyone who is a moderate, that is to say anyone who says that both sides are equally bad, is intellectually lazy, it's disingenuous, it's someone who just doesn't want to think for themselves. I hate to break it to you, but that is an absolute lie. In reality, taking a side is what's most lazy. If you speak to someone who is genuinely an astute observer of how the world works, and they don't take a side, if you speak to them and have a deep conversation about the problems of the world, what you'll notice is they won't necessarily have a direct, absolute answer, but almost everything they say will acknowledge the contradictions and be completely plausible. In reality, all the different issues that occur in the world, while they may follow similar patterns, often different issues require different sets of logic to resolve. The reason that people take sides in politics is because the human mind is inherently not the best at considering nuances in different issues at short notice. It likes simple answers. So for something to have mass appeal, it has to activate those mental shortcuts that the mind tends to take and appeal to people's emotions to get a quick reaction. When an idea is presented on that basis, it loses its truthfulness. And the likelihood of people becoming popular and having the right intentions is incredibly slim given what's required in order to become popular. I've actually never met somebody of particularly strong ideology who's actually logically consistent. In many cases, it means that they are consistent with a particular set of ideologies, which means that they only consider one side of a particular argument without considering others, and therefore are probably living a lie in many ways. Or, alternatively, they're consistent with the truth and acknowledge that ideology is irrational, but you cannot take a set of rules and say this ideology is how to solve problems in life. And in reality, if you wanted, in theory, the best possibly functioning society, you would have to consider every issue that came your way and consider the nuances of it and make a very detailed decision in every case. The human mind doesn't tend to like doing that. So in reality, the idea of not taking sides, if you truly do not take a side, isn't lazy, because it takes an astounding amount of cognitive effort. If you've ever tried it, you'll know there is nothing simple or passive about having a highly analytical mind, because every time you encounter an issue in life, whether it's something that affects you or doesn't affect you at all, your mind immediately says, hold on, there must be so many different facets to this that I can't possibly know everything. And your mind will work and work and work trying to find all the information and consider all the flaws in it in order to find the most objective answer. Ideologues, or people who just believe in one set of beliefs, go, if this is the issue, this must be the truth. Why? Because my leader says so, or my group says so. Be honest with yourself. Which of those sounds like a lazier solution? So the truth is that, in conclusion, we're all flawed. And you know what? It's nothing of which to be ashamed. You're not a bad person if you're not perfect. But if you are constantly fawning over pundits, people whose job it is to sell you ideas, like journalists and politicians, and you believe everything they say, and you don't question them, and every time they say something, even if some part of you says that they might be wrong, you try and find a justification for believing them because you want to be consistent with your set of beliefs, you have been deceived, okay? Because I'm telling you, someone who gets paid significantly to stand there and espouse rhetoric to convince you that a certain set of ideas is true does not have your best interest in mind. They're doing it because they benefit, and the benefit, apart from money, is that they innately desire control. It's an evil desire, it is a highly unnatural desire. Critical thinking is not just for a select number of people, it's for everyone. The best way to live life is as a critical thinker. And whenever there is hypocrisy, whenever there is someone who will gladly believe something but ignore all the ways in which it's wrong, there is ill intent, and there will be a lack of humanity in that endeavour. Selling something is only okay when your part of the benefit is obvious. If someone is urging you to do something but claims, oh, no, this has nothing to do with me, it's in your best interest, I'm only doing this for you, they're lying. Nobody is that selfless. Now, to anyone who says, oh, you're only using this particular rhetoric because these people use it and therefore you're like them, false. I'm here to tell you right here and right now, for all of time, I'm not an ideologue and I don't have anything to gain from talking about these topics. I'm not sponsored by any political causes or any ideological causes. I'm not selling material. I don't have disciples. And I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. I'm not going to tell you what to believe. I'm not going to tell you to go out and do the wrong thing. Like I've always said, what you see on the internet is not advice. You are responsible for your actions. I am not responsible for your actions. But what I can say is that the human mind is fundamentally flawed, and that if all these different ideas on one issue all claim to be the truth, then they all must be lying in some way, because diametrically opposed ideas cannot be simultaneously true. If I make a suggestion that seems to parallel the ideas that are espoused by a particular political group, it's not because I support that group. I do not have political affiliations. I'm not trying to persuade you to believe anything. When I suppose that something might have some validity, it's not because I'm supporting the people who espouse it, it's because the idea in and of itself seems to me, based on all the evidence that I've witnessed and all the arguments that I've analysed, seems to be the closest to objective truth, even if it's not the absolute truth. And that's the only reason I'm discussing it, to try and dissect and suggest which ideas might carry more weight and more benefit than others. But in the end, what you believe is your business, and you should not take what you see on the internet, including anything that I say, as an indication of what you should believe or what you should do. I'm not here to sell you the correct solution to everything. All I'm here to do is show you just how complex the human mind is and just what sort of tactics and phenomena exist in the world. Well, thank you for joining me for this episode. In the future, I will be potentially discussing more topics of a political nature, but again, from a non-political standpoint, not with the intention of trying to sell you on what ideas are correct or not, but with the intention of just showing you how complex life is. Now, as per usual, if you have concerns of any kind, please seek professional advice. And whether you agree with me or disagree with me, I'd love to hear from you. If you want to, write to me, make a suggestion about what you'd like to hear discussed. If I feel I'm competent to discuss it, then I may do so. If you'd like to be on the program with me, also feel free to write to me. But until next time, take care.